Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a video to help you all out on the Net Plus Learning Activity number 10, Class C, Subnetting number 3. This is actually the third assignment of the three that we started for module module 6, chapter 6. Um, it's for the TCP/IP basics. So there was a video right here, introduction to IPv4 subnetting video instruction. I'm going to add another video so that way maybe if we, do it this way, maybe it'll help you understand a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and get the assignment and I will go ahead and download the document. Now remember, this is a Word document, so if you don't have Word, it'll probably go to Google and you can get it right there. So I'm going to go ahead and save it to my desktop and open it. Okay, once we get it open, we're going to enable editing. And there's a few things I want to talk about before we start. Now, this is the hardest one of the three, but if you can figure this one out, you actually can get the other two done pretty easy. So we're starting with an IP address of 201.67.5.0, which is a Class C network. We're going to be borrowing 4 bits, excuse me, and we need to know what is the subnet mask, what is the prefix, and what is the increment. So when you look at the document, it looks really like a lot of stuff. But a couple of things you need to understand. One is they already did the calculations for us. There's an actual formula for calculating how many subnets you're going to have by taking the number of bits and basically having two raised by the number of bits you're borrowing. So that would create eight. Excuse me. It would create 16 subnets. Now it shows 15, but remember you're starting with zero. So to make this pretty easy, I want to explain a couple things real quick. So one, what is a subnet? Well, we know by default that the subnet for a Class C is a 255.255.0. Now, before you get caught up in this, though, remember one thing: we borrowed four. So this number right here is going to change here at the end because now it's no longer zero, which means we use all of these. We're actually using four of these. So hold on, let me see if I can get to the pause for a second. Okay, we're back on. So I had to stop for a second to look for this sketch board so I can help you out. So the thing is, what I was mentioning was on this particular item, it says that we have to find the subnet mask of this. Now we're borrowing four. So when you borrow, whatever you borrow, you're going to have to add together to create that final octet. So I'm going to take 128, take 128, and 64, 32, and 16. So if I can just remember those numbers, 64. I'm going to be adding these up real quick, 64. And then I'm going to add a 32. And last, I'm going to add a 16. So 8 and 4 is 12. carry my 1. That's 1. That's a 9 and 1. So 192. So I put a 192 up here. Sorry about this. This is my first time actually using this, but you get the gist of the idea. So we got 192 and 32. So that's a 4. 9 and 3 is 12. Carry my 1, which was 224. And last but not least, we're going to add 224 and 16. Now, when we add this number, this gives us our last octet, which is the piece that we're going to plug in right here, because our subnet does change, because we had to borrow. So let's see, that's 10. 1 is going to be 4, so your number is 240. So this is the number we're going to actually write right there. So I'm going to go ahead and push that in real quick, 240. Bang, that's your new subnet. Now, what it means by prefix, if we can remember that on a C class, your prefix usually is 24. You have use the first octet, which is 8, use the second octet, which is 16, use the third octet, which is 24. The thing is, we borrowed 4. So when we do that, we have to add on 4 to this. So instead of 24, it's going to be 28. So our new prefix is 28. So here comes the easy part. The problem is everybody asks the question, what's the increment? Well, there's a magic line right here. Since we borrowed 4, we're going to take 16 as our increment. Now, what that means in a nutshell is my network is going to be the first thing. And remember, since we're working with a 0, all of this is going to be 0, the very first one. Now, there is an easier way to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do the first one real quick, and then I'll try to explain it to you. So the first decimal is 0. In other words, we're looking at, if you really want to look at how the number truly looks, it'd be 201.67.5.0. That's your very first IP address, and that's your network ID. Now, we're going to go ahead and do the simplification of it, so that way, we can get this done quicker. So now with that said, if this is 0 all the way across, that means my first subnet has to stay on zeros. Now, what that means is I'm going to be looking at a 1, a 2, a 4, and an 8. So I add that up, and I have 8 plus 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14, and 1 more is 15. So by adding up those right there, I basically set the new, my broadcast ID as 201.67.5.15. Now, that's because I added up these right here. So now a couple things just happened. One, we know that our increment is 16, and we can put that up there. We know that everything starts with 0 because that's where we're beginning is 0. And we do know that you have to have a network ID that has all zeros here and a broadcast ID which has all of these filled in here. Now, the host range, just to make these numbers easy, understand that it is 201.67.5.1 through, let's see if I can get this in here because it's kind of hard to get the box is really small. 201.67.5 dot. Remember, it has to be the one before 15, so it's 14. So from here on out, we're just going to make it simple. Dot, the endings. Everything else stays the same. What I mean is all of this right here, it stays the same. It doesn't change. So just to make it easy to understand, if we're working in this kind of subnet, we're actually keeping all of this the same. That first 3 octets never changes. The last one does. So that's the one thing we got to worry about. Now, Now it looks really intimidating when you look at it on this particular setup. But I'm going to make it as easy as I possibly can because I need you to understand something that every 16 um, addition to this first one, and then the next one will create the network IDs. So I know that what we're supposed to be doing is we're supposed to tally the number that goes here. But let's make this really easy, okay? So that you understand what we're doing because this is really the simplest way to do it. I know I need a 16. The 16 is me taking this zero. Let me see if I can show it to you here. So let me see if I can erase everything. I've never actually done this either. This is the erase race. So I wonder if you can double click everything. Oh yeah, there you go. Not as cool as I like, but it's getting the job done. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the zero and I'm adding 16 so I can get my next network. So that would be 16. Now remember, this is my network number 1. This first one over here was 0, so that's their 0. So don't get confused. What I'm saying is that we're looking at this being 0.16. Now, the easiest way to do it is to look at the next network ID, which is, if you add 16, will be 32. Now, just pay attention to the pattern where I'm going with this. So 32, we're going to add 16 more, which is going to make it 48. And then, see, 16 and 48. That one, I have to go back to my math. So 48 plus 16 more. Now remember, this is the increment that I'm adding on here. So 8 and 6 is 14. Carry my 1, that's 4, that's 6. 64. So I'm dealing with 64 right here. Now I'm going to see how I'm lining up with all these zeros. That's what I'm doing right now. Now the next thing I'm doing is I got to add another 16 to the 64, which will give me 10 and 80. Is that right? So 80, 80. Then I'm going to add another one. That'll be 96. And I add another one that's, see, put 12. That's, oh, I'll have to go to a paper. Hold on. Sorry. 96 plus 16 is 12, 1, and that's 11. So 112. Hold on. So dot 112. We're adding another 16 on. We got a long way to go. Don't worry. So add another 16 on there. That's 18. So it's 128. You can do this math, on paper if you'd like. So 128, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just do this on the paper. So 8 and 6 is 4, 14. So it's 144. I'm going to the next subnet. Remember, I'm still dealing with only zeros. So 144 and 16 is 10, 6, 160. And we're going to add 16 more. That's 176. 16 more is, see, 176 and 16 is 12, 192, 192. Remember, I'm still sticking with the zeros. That's a super important thing to remember what I'm doing. So now we got 192 plus 16 is 8, 10, 1, 208. 8 plus 16 more is 14, 1, 2, 224. We're almost there though. And I'll tell you why. These are 240, 240, no, 224. We're reaching almost to 255, and that's the highest you can go. So 224 plus 16 more is 10. That's 1. That's 4. That's 240. So 240. Now here's the deal. If I take that 240 and I add 16 more, I'm going to be looking at 256. And since you can't go 256 because 256 is over the 255 mark. Now, a best way to think about it is this: uh, if you have 360 degrees in a circle, and 0 degrees, that 60 degree 360 degrees and the 0 degrees is the exact same number. It's just called differently. Like 0 degrees shows that nothing moved. 360 is it went all the way around. However, it ends up in the exact same spot. So 256 would be another zero. So we don't go any further than 256. So 255 is the highest. And with that said, I want you to start noticing the pattern real quick, well, before I start filling everything else in. Everything went by 16s all the way, and there's always a network ID that has zeros. So keep that in your mind. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the broadcast ID. Now, the broadcast ID is the number before the next subnet's network ID. So this is subnet 2, this is a network ID line, and instead of 32, we're going to make this 31. And if that's true, on this next one, instead of dot 48, it's going to be dot 47. Instead of dot 64, it's going to be dot 63. Instead of dot 80, it's dot 79. See how quick it starts to fill in? Just remember, it's one less than the network before it. Well, the network ID, sorry. And 11, don't forget that. And then 128 is 127. Uh, this might throw a little bit off, but it's 144, so it's 143. Dot 159. Dot 175. Dot 191. Dot 207. Dot 223. Dot 239. And last but not least, because these things are actually 16 apart from each other as well. If you notice that if you add 31 and you add 16 more, it's 47. You add 16 to 47, it's 63. You add 63 and 16, it's 79. I'm still using the increment of 16. Now I'm just dealing with the different number, that the broadcast ID, which is all ones. That means we used all our spaces up. So the last thing you're going to have is 255 because there's nothing bigger than 255. So you see how quickly I put everything together. Now here's the other thing. I have to do the host range. Remember, your host range is all of your computers getting their IP addresses by just this subnet. So it cannot be it can't be the network ID and it can't be the broadcast uh, IP address. So it has to be in between. So remember, it's still 201.67.5 something. And that something is one more than my network ID and one less. And you can put the word through if you want to. If not, just put a dash. I don't understand what it is. It's dot 30. So you see how that becomes that. Now, all it is filling in this blank saying, hey, I'm starting with dot 33. And you can even put the word two. I understand that to me, that's saying, hey, I mean, right now I'm not sure exactly what the actual terminology is, but we do know that's the range. And if there's something else, I'll let you know that they use. But now we're just filling it in, saying, okay, so it's 249 to two. I mean, dot 62. Remember, I'm taking one more than the network ID and one less in the broadcast. And so all I'm doing is filling all this in real quick. And don't get too fast because I've had a couple of students before. They'll sit there and they'll get super quick and they're like, "Yeah, we're going real fast," and then they mess up one number and it can mess everything up. Because once you're off on one number, you're off. I mean, um, it just it won't calculate correctly. Almost there. We're almost halfway done. So now we got dot 113 to dot 126, dot 129 to 129 to dot 142. This is kind of weird because it didn't close up the top, but it's okay. 145 to 158. Yeah, 158. There you go. Dot 161 to dot 174. Dot 177 to dot 190. Remember, I'm only going one more and one less. 193 to less dot 206. Just one more. Don't go too. I mean, don't go any further than that. So 190, 209 to dot 222. We're almost there. 225 to dot 238. And last but not least, 241. Excuse me. So to 254. And there is all the thing filled in. Now, the thing is, if you're saying, well, what happens if somebody asks me to fill this in? Well, it's not really too hard to think about how to fill it in. We know that we need a 16, so I'll put a 1 right here. But if I already used all my spaces, all I had to do is put zeros here. And if that's true, then the 1 right underneath it has to be the same as the network IDs part because it's in the same subnet. So now, if we're looking at 32, then I need 132. What I do? Well, I got to put some zeros in places because I need to cover those spots. And like I said before, if it's in the same subnet, it's the exact same numbers. They go right here. Same binary number. 48. Well, now 48 is a little bit different because there's no 48 here. But if I take a 32 and I take a 16 and I add them together, that's 48. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these and then I'll let you finish the rest of it. So it's 64. There's a 64. I have 1, 0, 0, and a 0 right there. An 80. Well, an 80 is nothing more than a 64 plus a 16. So I have a 16, a 64, but I got to put some zeros in places to keep everybody understand that 16 plus that is 80. And if you actually filled in all this stuff, you see how these numbers all correspond. Um, so we're dealing with 96. Well, 96 is 96. So 96 would probably be a 32 and a 64 because 2 plus 4 is 6, and then add that to the 66, and that'd be 96. So that's where they get the 96. So what I'm dealing with is a 1 right there and a 1 right there. And that's the reason why I didn't want to show you this particular way, because what's happening is if you were to keep this whole pattern memorized, the pattern is really awkward. So the best thing to do is know that you have to if you can figure out what your increment is, which is the biggest part, you'll be able to figure out everything else, and you can actually reverse engineer this chart if you have to. So 112 would be 64 plus 32 plus 16. So let me just double check the math. I'm gonna do this offline. So I do 64 plus 32, which is 96, plus 16 more, 12, 1. And what was it? 112? Was that correct? Yep, there it is, 112. So I'm going to go 1 here, and 1 here, and 0. And remember, the pattern is if you have whatever you have here on the top goes on the bottom. Whatever's on the top goes on the bottom. Whatever's on the top goes on the bottom. Whatever's on the top goes on the bottom. So let's finish out what we got. So 128, we needed only 128. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, fill this in, fill this in, fill this in. That's for the 128. Now the problem is that as we get further and further away from this, it's better to memorize this whole chart if you can. It's real simple. It's just 2 to the 0 power, 2 to the 1 power, 2 to the 2, 2 to the 3, 2 to the 4, 2 to the 5, 2 to the 6, and 2 to the 7. And you're probably thinking, well, why is it at 7? Well, always keep in mind that it's an 8 octet. It's 8 bits, but we start with 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but there's 8 pieces, 8 bits that we're working with. So let me do this real quick, and I'm going to finish this out for you because I know it's, the video is probably going to be kind of long, but I just want to make sure you get this done as fast as you can. So 144 is technically a 128 and a 16. So this is the 128 and this is a 16. And this is where I said it's really confusing. So I'd rather just remember whatever's on the top goes on the bottom. Subnet, which is 160. So I'm doing with a 160. That's going to be 128 and 16. Let me see if I'm right. Hold on. So 128 and 16 is 14. So for 144. And I needed, what did I need? I forgot. Let me check again. 160. So I'm at 144. So I got to make something that works with 160. Well, let's see now. Is there anything with a 6 on it? Nope. It's already used the 16. So maybe it's not 160. Okay. So there is another way to do this. If it gets kind of big like this, so we don't get too confused, remember that you're basically taking so I can get rid of this real fast. I'm trying to get this video out for you. We're basically taking 160, right? Now remember the numbers that we're working with is 128, 64, 32, and 16. So I would think for sure you need a 128 to come out of this. So that tells me I'm going to be using a 128. So 10 from 8 is 2. Remember, you took a borrowed one, so 5 is 32. And you know what? We do have a 32. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to take 128, and we're going to take a 32, and we're going to put some zeros right there on the chart, and we're done with this piece. So I put a 1, a 0, 1, a 0, a 1, and a 0, and that finishes at 160. Now 170, since we already have a 32, remember now we're doing 170. Wait, hold on. That didn't sound right when I said that. 170. 176. That makes sense. So 176. And we take a 128. I'm taking my biggest number and working with it, and then I'll find the rest of them. So 16 is 8. I brought over a 1, so that's a 6, and this is 4. I have 48. Well, just looking at the numbers, if I take it, I can't take a 64. If you see what I'm doing is I'm also looking at my numbers right here. I can't take 64, but I can take a 32. And that's a 6, and that's a 1. And I do have a 1 right there. So you know what I got? I got a 128, I got a 0, I got a 32, and a 16. So there's the other part of your chart. So it's 1, 0, 1, 1. Now we're getting pretty close to the end. I can't honestly tell you this. This very last one for sure is all ones because that's that. At the end, we're gonna have to have this being all ones as well. So that I know for sure is all ones because all of this combined, all these numbers added up, all of these numbers right here, it's always going to be 255. So now I'll get to fill it these networks right here, and I'm done. So 192 minus 128. 12 is 4. That's carrying my that makes that an 8. So it's 64. Well, I do have a 64 there. So you know what? My next thing is going to be this, and that. It's going to be a 1, 1. And this kind of seems a little confusing. I know it's taking a little more time than it should. But all of this for sure is right because I did that one to begin with. And basically, I'm just filling this using these numbers right here, which are already correct. So 208 is. Let me go ahead and erase some of this so that way you can see what I'm doing. I'm not going to erase this other part because you're going to need that. So now I know that we're dealing with 208, and I'm going to take 224 as well so that way I can get this over with. So I need 208. And we said the last one was 224. I'm just bringing the numbers over so I can see them. So now 228, 208. Sorry, I don't know. I can see 208. So that's 0, and that's 8 because that becomes a 10. They carry a 1, so that's 80. Well, I can take 64 from 80. So right now I'm using one of these. I'm using one of those. Let's see, 6 is 10. That's 6. That's 7. That's 1. Oh, I have a 16. Oh yeah. So right here I'll put a 0 and a 1. So it's 1101. So this one is 1101. Remember, whatever's on top goes on the bottom. And the last but not least is a 224. So 224 minus 128. I can almost tell you it's going to be this right here. And I'm just looking at the pattern, but let me make sure. So that's a 4, that's a 6. This I borrowed a 1, but now I have to borrow another 1. So that's 11 over 2 is a 96. And I have to take 64 because I can take 64 from 96, which will leave me with a 2 and a 3. Oh, well, you know what? If I have a 3 and a 2, I can take that with nothing left over. So the answer is 11, 10. And now the whole chart is pretty much done. You can fill in the rest. It really isn't that big of a deal. Because like I said, whatever's on the top goes on the bottom and it stays with its network. So then when you finish that, you just go ahead and save it and turn it in.